Hey everybody, welcome back to the Live Ultralight Podcast powered by Outdoor Vitals. Today we have another episode of Ask OV. So we've got myself and Brigham, our lead designer, on the podcast to answer listener questions that have been written in. Now you can ask these questions by specifically just writing into Outdoor Vitals support team. You can leave comments on the YouTube channel where we also post these. Wherever you want to, get us these questions and we are happy to answer them. And just help people get outside and have more enjoyable experiences. So we're just going to jump right in. We do try to keep these episodes a little bit faster paced. So we try not to go much over 20 to 30 minutes on these and just make sure that we're answering the questions the best we possibly can. Usually we'll play a little bit of catch up here, but we just did that on a recent podcast. We've been backpacking a lot on the Grand Canyon lately, and I know you've got a trip to Capitol Reef, if that's still on this week.
Yep.
So yeah, we're spending a lot of time out, a lot of nights out there, testing gear and just, I don't know, doing what we love to do, spending nights outside and spending time outside. So it's been a really enjoyable spring, a very busy spring from a lot of the trips, but I don't think we'd have it any other way, or we'd probably do it a different way.
Yeah. No, it's all good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just jump right in. And as usual, I usually skim these beforehand, but I don't practice reading them aloud. So Susan wrote in and asked, I was wondering if Brigham could share his tips and tricks on packing up certain items. I find myself dreading the process of deflating and rolling up sleeping pads. I keep thinking that there has to be a better way than to roll, unroll, re-roll, unroll, roll again and again to try to purge as much air out of it. I figured if anyone knows the secret, it has to be Brigham. So, starting with sleeping pads, and then any other ways that maybe you tightly package items in your bag.
Yeah, so I think I'm getting what it sounds like is she's not looking for an alternative to rolling up, but how to tightly roll it up and get the air out.
Yeah, is there a way to do it more quickly, efficiently, tighter?
I'll walk through what I do really quick. So in the morning, I sit up, I wake up, I sit up, and when I have made the decision to start packing up, I'll pop the valve and let my body weight push as much weight as possible, and then I'll kind of lay down real quick. Maybe roll over onto my stomach and just move my arms around and spread out to try to push the air out. And then I'll just sit up on my knees inside the tent really quick and grab the end of the pad and just really quickly just roll it up like a scroll without folding it. And then I'll roll it back out, and then I roll it into thirds, start at the bottom end, and then just start with a really tight roll and then just build that roll up. And that will push all the air out as I'm doing it. And then, you know, when you get to where you've rolled it up and there's maybe 6 inches of pad left unrolled, then you kind of have to finagle a little bit. I'll just put that between my knees, turn it sideways so I can squeeze that last bit of air out of it, and then close the valve off and then stuff it in the bag. That's how I do it. It's definitely neat and tidy. It is. I agree. It's not something I enjoy doing. It's kind of a pain, but the way I am is I do like to pack my pack really neat and tidy. So it's definitely something I find worth doing. If I wasn't going to even do that, I am okay if I can accept, that I want to be even faster with just not even putting it in a stuff sack, just rolling it up, getting the air out, and just kind of folding it into a large rectangle and then sticking that inside the pack.
I haven't really done that. I always roll mine. So that's something interesting. I'm pretty much the same as you. I would say the one caveat here is depending on the pad, sometimes they can trap a little bit of air in it. And so you may just want to experiment with the number of folds or how you're folding it. I've had in certain pads where, like Brigham just said, he folds his into thirds. With like the Thermarest style pads, folding it into thirds works really, really well. I've had other pads where sometimes that seems to cut off the ability for the air to get all the way to the top. So I would just say, depending on your pad, experiment a little with, like, are you folding it into thirds? Are you folding it into fourths? And then, if there's just any other way to make that a little bit easier pad dependent. I also, like, one last thing is when I'm rolling it, it inevitably starts to open up or spread wider. So I will always hold it with the other hand. I kind of adjust it back in and then continue to roll it, adjust it back in, continue to roll it. It never just rolls perfectly up this way without it starting to spread at the top. So if you're expecting that, it doesn't really work that way for us. But any other like neat tips and tricks to keep your pack tidy that come to mind? And we pack a dry bag specifically, and that allows us to compress like our sleeping bag. And then, once we've got all the air out of that dry bag, then we roll it nice and tight. And so that's one thing that I know both of us do.
I think in 2 minutes I could quickly run down exactly how I take down my tent. And my tent has everything in it. So I try to not just have a bunch of stuff laying around in the tent. If it's something that I'm not wearing or may put on in the night, it's not in my tent, it's in the pack. So in the morning when I'm taking down my pad, I'm setting anything that's in the tent outside the tent so that once the pad's rolled up, I grab my dry bag, stuff the quilt in there, and then I won't completely seal it up yet. I'll just set that outside, and then everything else is out of the tent. So I take my rolled up pad, set it outside the tent, then I get out and I take the tent down. Once the tent is down and stuffed in its stuff sack, then I will compress the air completely out of my top quilt, squeeze that and compress it down, seal it off, clip it. So now it's a moldable object that I squeeze to match the shape of the bottom of my pack, and then I will stick that in the pack. I want to do that like the very last thing so that it doesn't start to expand while I'm packing everything else up. So I do that once everything is taken down, then I'll do that rolling up of the quilt, smash it, mold it to match the bottom of my pack, stuff that in, and then in 3 minutes, everything else is stuffed in the pack. The tent goes on top, the pad on top of that. Might throw a layer in there just to fill up some space. And then those are like the big items, the quilt, the tent, and the pad. And then everything else just fills up space in there. But I pack things, I fill up the space of the bottom of the pack with the dry bag that has my quilt in it. And then the tent is placed in horizontally, my pad is placed in horizontally, and then everything else just fills up the spaces. So,
yeah. The only other thing I know that we do for saving space specifically is sometimes we will repackage our freeze-dried meals because sometimes those freeze-dried meal bags can just take up way too much space. They have dead air in them. So sometimes if we're getting tight on space, we will repackage them into Ziplocs that definitely will save space. Moving right along here, Daniel is actually part 2 of a question that we've answered. His second part of this question was, sometimes things break or fail on the trip. What equipment has failed and how do we fix it on the trail? What are some tips for emergency gear repair? So 2 things that I personally take is I take a tenacious tape or actually Gear Aid like field repair kit. Inside of that, it has some tenacious tape patches as well as it's called a seam grip or aqua seal, essentially that allows you to patch a pad on the trail. Now, caveat here, patching a pad on the trail is not fun and it takes time. That glue typically takes about 8 hours to cure or to harden. So if you pop your pad at night, consider like it's probably popped for that night. It's not going to be till the next night that you could have it potentially fixed. So just wanted to throw that out there. The other thing is I bring a small sewing kit. And I mean, this is very, very ultralight. A couple of needles, spool or tool of tiny thread, like tiny spools of thread. And that's something that I have had to use to repair. Actually, my dog on one of our trips this spring has like a vest style backpack. And it broke. And so I did have to sew that on trail. And that was really handy. But I've always considered the sewing kit more for things like backpacks, maybe some apparel like, maybe like a pant or something like that. But for the most part, a lot of the stuff I'm taking out there is probably going to be more fixed with a tenacious tape patch. So,
yeah, I don't even take the sewing kit. I take tenacious tape with the little aqua seal, tiny little brush and the little tube of seal. And yeah, I think with pads, like that's the most likely kind of failure that could really put a hurt on somebody's trip. And sometimes I think some little pokes are doable with just tenacious tape, but it's a gamble. Like it may not work, and then, like you said, if you're messing with the sealant and putting tape on, like that's not getting fixed right away. So, like maybe people would think about things like pole sleeves and stuff like that. I don't even. Well, I use a trekking pole tent, but maybe if they're in a really, really windy place and really far from, any other option to get assistance, like maybe the pole sleeve thing might be worth it to you. Those, but
I think that really depends on the shelter you have, because in our case, one reason trekking poles, they're quite durable, but I guess you could snap it while you're hiking. But if worse came to worse, I would use hopefully I'm in an area where I can find a stick that would also work.
Yeah, with
round off the top of the stick. It's not going to poke through, and you could use a stick in a pinch. But yeah, if I was using a regular style shelter, they usually come with a pole sleeve, and I would just leave it in. I mean, I would continue to take it. I wouldn't take it out of my pack by any means. They're usually quite small and light and easy to bring. So pads, though, definitely the most likely to fail I've seen. Other than that, I've seen, people put holes in puffies or things of that nature, but I don't know, knock on wood, we haven't had gear failures.
Prevention, I think, is probably more important than the tools to repair it. Some people just are kind of not, their minds aren't focused that way, but we sometimes kind of joke about it. I'm pretty paranoid about preventing punctures and stuff with my tent sites.
Right. Yeah.
I always sleep with a foam pad underneath, and I'd rather just put some prevention into it and still have the option to repair. But yeah, prevention's it's worth it.
All right. Another question here. I'm going to just kind of summarize this a little bit, but Zachary Johnson is asking why we don't install thumb loops on all long sleeve tops. I think he just means like everything. He's saying from base layers, mid layers, insulation layers, is help with layering and comfort. Saying the only thing that he thinks you shouldn't have thumb hole loops on are rain jackets or like expedition parkas. So on this, I'm actually not as sure where the question's coming from, because we do have thumb holes, or at least layering thumb hole loops on almost every jacket.
On a lot of pieces. I
know have them on base layers.
Base layers we don't. That's mostly based on just experience with the base layers. We've never felt like it was worth adding the extra, and just having, I don't really want to layer loop onto loop onto loop onto loop. Kind of like, I'd rather layer hoods than thumb loops. I know they're small, but with the way we make base layers, the wrist cup is trim enough that it's just not a complaint that we really have heard in any substantial amount from anybody. And in personal testing, like on our side, it's not even a thing, because they fit close enough that we're not having our sleeves, fly up our elbow when we put on a jacket or a Ventus or anything like that.
Yeah, one distinction I would make is there's like thumb loops where they go through the fabric, and then there's other pieces of ours where there is a thumb tab, I guess you would call it, where it's more like a piece it's not actually a slit in the fabric. It's a piece of stretchy elastic, essentially, you put on your thumb while you're layering, and then you pull it back off. But we do have those, and you're not going to see those maybe as easily on, say, product listing images and things, but we do have them there. And then just like you're saying, with something like our altitude fits quite closely. And so we don't really have it coming up our arm. However, that's not to say that in another piece, another base layer that we might be creating, that it might be designed to fit a little more baggy and that we wouldn't add it back on. But I would say for the most part, we do have either a thumbhole loop or a thumbhole tab. I don't know if that's the right word for it.
Well, I would say, yeah, we either have thumb holes or thumb loops.
Yeah.
On a lot of stuff.
For pretty much everything. All right, we've got a couple of rain jacket questions to follow up on. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know. That's okay. What's the difference between a rain jacket and a hard shell?
That quick answer is a lot of these kind of questions, there is not a Webster's dictionary type definitive official answer book. So what I may say is going to differ from what someone else will say. So I would start with that because that's the real answer is maybe there's none. Because there isn't an official answer. There is no governing or defining body that says what a hard shell is and what a rain jacket is.
First, maybe start then with what they have in common.
Yeah, what they have in common, assuming the hard shell is waterproof, and that would be the thing. They are both designed to prevent moisture from penetrating and getting into our clothing system from the outside. Now, in general, I think hard shells are essentially they're just a heavier, more burly version of the same thing. They might have more layers to the general, what the shell is made of. But that's pretty much the biggest difference is they'll maybe use a more robust and or heavy face fabric. There's still a waterproof breathable membrane in there. Some of them might have two on the hard shell side, but they're working in concert with each other to do the same thing. And then there might have a backer on the inside. And then some hard shells may even have a lining fabric on the inside between the person and the backer. So that might be 4 layers in a hard shell, but in general, it's kind of as it sounds, like it's a harder shell. So the fabric is just thicker, heavier, more durable. They might even have reinforced or extra layering of more durable face fabric in certain places, and they are, the way I see it, also thought of as more of a skiing, snowboarding, maybe climbing, mountaineering type piece versus just a dedicated rain shell. But it's a very...
Which I hear people call them both. You'll hear someone just call a rain jacket a hard shell sometimes.
Yeah.
Or something, but I think that sums it up really well. I think a hard shell just typically is a little more burly and multi-layered is kind of the easiest way to. So I think that's good. Should you only buy DWR treated down? And this question came from a YouTube comment. Easy answer is no. So I would answer.
I would say
yes or no, which is no.
We shouldn't tell you what you should or shouldn't do. Like that's my default answer is I don't want to say what you should and shouldn't do in regards to down and most things.
Yeah, but I think the idea, if I was to read between the lines here, I'm going to make some assumptions here. The concept that your down has to be DWR treated, I would say, is false. There is a natural level of DWR on most down, at least well-produced down. They're not going to strip the natural DWR off of that down unless they have to, which usually entails that they're putting on a different coating. So they're going to have some levels of some ability to manage moisture already, right? Again, you're coming off of these down clusters are coming off of a waterfowl. I mean, a bird that lives in water. So there's a level that already exists there. And there are pros and cons to DWR treatments. And I don't know if we have time to get into that really deep here. So if you want that, maybe write in an additional comment and we can really get into the weeds on that. I think get into the weeds on that.
There's a lot that you could get into. I mean, and again, this person says DWR, and then you mention the DWR that already comes on a waterfowl, and then somebody else might even think of another type of technology or treatment applied to down as a DWR, and when in fact none of them are actually the same thing. So when you say a goose or a duck has DWR, that doesn't mean that has a man-made chemical that has been applied to the duck. That means it has the similar properties naturally occurring on the down that come from that animal that provide some water resistance to the down. Same thing with the man-made or man-applied, durable water repellent finishes that are applied to down via, some kind of manipulation of chemicals and or other compounds or substances. And then, there's other treatments applied to down that are not chemical necessarily at all, or not, some kind of coating or something that's sprayed onto the down. They're just, and we've used at least 2, if not all 3 versions, right? So, and they all have their pros and cons. They all have some benefits and some compromises. But DWR is a term that's often maybe used a little too liberally, without enough specificity.
I would also just say with this, you can buy something and you can do at-home treatments too. So like, let's say you find a piece of gear you absolutely love, or it's a used piece of gear, you get it at a really good price. It doesn't mean that you can't also treat it yourself with certain treatments, like a DWR treatment. And in most cases, if you are buying a DWR treatment, at some point, you're going to have to retreat it with the DWR. But yeah, there's lots of pros and cons. Actually, maybe the best place just to quickly reference you would be to go back to when we released our newest version of our down top quilt last fall and listen to that episode about the behind the designs of the top quilt. We talk pretty extensively about a newer treatment of down that we're putting in that with our Expa dry down, and it has a nano gold particle permanently embedded into that down versus a man-made DWR treatment. And there's pros and cons to it, and we've been very, very happy with actually not having a DWR as well. So, but that's also something that's come out very, very recently. That wasn't available 3 years ago, right? So like, it's just always changing. But I would just say, in general, like I would almost rate it this way: the quality of the down you're getting is more important than the coating of the down that you're putting on it. And maybe that will help you put the priorities in the right spot as you're looking to make a purchase too. So,
yeah.
What makes rain gear wet out? Are more lightweight or more breathable fabrics more likely to wet out faster? This is going to be our final question for the day.
Yeah. Okay. So again, this is another one of those terms that is not defined, and even in conversation, it's loosely defined. So like, what is wetting out? Some people say wetting out means the thing has failed and it's leaking. Some people understand wetting out to be, it becomes saturated. It becomes completely soaked. Water stops beating off of the face fabric. And that's probably more along the lines of what I consider wetting out. But I would try to make clear that a jacket or fabric wetting out is not the same as failing and or being breached by water, meaning water now is coming through it. A jacket can be wet out and still block water from penetrating through all layers of the fabric. But the easiest answer is what makes a fabric wet out is when the DWR is completely absolved and non-existent anywhere on the face fabric. And so there is no kind of chemical process that's making water beat up and bounce off or run off easily. And so now it's nothing more than just the face fabric, that nylon or polyester, those yarns that are woven together to make that face fabric. The water eventually just kind of absorbs into that, and what's behind that is the waterproof breathable membrane. That membrane is incredibly thin, like it's thinner than a human hair. So if you envision that, now you might understand that you're not going to feel like you're going to feel everything that's on the face fabric. Once that becomes wet and saturated, like that little membrane that is almost always, it's completely transparent because it's so thin. Like it's not going to provide any physical barrier that is going to prevent you from feeling that completely saturated fabric. So that's kind of like the wet out state is, the face fabric. That's a layer of fabric, just like it could be your shirt. It's completely wet, and now you're gonna feel that wetness. Just like if you get like a cheap plastic bag that maybe you would put produce in at the grocery store, put your hand in that plastic bag and dunk it in an ice bath. Like your hand, that bag is going to kind of suck up around your skin, and your hand is going to feel like it's in water. And that's exactly the same thing, but infinitely more so because that membrane is so thin. But that's essentially the DWR stopping to resist the moisture from the exterior. That's the bulk answer of what causes a fabric to wet out.
So then, would a more lightweight or breathable fabric be more likely to wet out?
In general, I would say, yeah. I mean, you've got less material, or lighter or a thinner layer that is going to absorb water or become saturated faster. Mm-hmm. So yeah, in general, yes.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay. I think that covers everything for rain jackets. And we're coming up on our time. So there's another episode of Ask OV. If you guys want to have your own questions answered or have us expand upon a topic for you, make sure to write in. Just go to ultravitals.com and write into our support and say, this is a question for the podcast that I'd like answered, and ask your question. Or you can also jump over to our YouTube channel where this will be posted, and you can leave comments there. On the comment section, I will sometimes just write straight back to you some answers and whatnot, or we'll take those and actually put them into a future podcast if we need to elaborate on them at a deeper level as well. So keep writing these questions in. We'll keep making this content and keep doing our best to help you guys have more enjoyable experiences outside based on any experiences that we've had ourselves. So thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed. Share this with a friend if you think that it would be valuable to them, and make sure you've reviewed the podcast if you can on whatever platform that you are currently listening to it. And we'll see you guys in a future episode.